the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, which encompasses the boroughs of Manhattan and the Bronx in New York City, along with Dutchess, Orange, Putnam, Rockland, Sullivan, and Westchester counties. The office prosecutes cases involving violations of federal laws, and represents the interests of the United States government and its agencies in criminal and civil matters. The office investigates and prosecutes a broad array of criminal conduct of every conceivable magnitude, even when the conduct arises in distant places. Today, the office is at the forefront of many important areas of criminal law enforcement, including terrorism, white-collar and cybercrime, mortgage fraud, public corruption, gang violence, organized crime, international narcotics trafficking and civil rights violations. Similarly, the office litigates among the most complex and significant civil cases the Department of Justice handles, from large affirmative civil fraud cases to cases in the environmental, healthcare, immigration, and bankruptcy areas, as well as cases implicating classified information. June 12, 2024. Illinois sex offender charged with coercion and enticement of 15-year-old girl in Dutchess County. Damian Williams, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, and James Smith, the Assistant Director in charge of the New York Field Office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, announced today a complaint charging Derek Hasselbrink, aka Derek Spear, with enticing a minor to engage in unlawful sexual activity and committing this offense, while being required to register as a sex offender. Hasselbrink was arrested this morning and was presented in federal court in the Central District of Illinois before U.S. Magistrate Judge Karen L. McNaught. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams said, as alleged, Derek Hasselbrink, a 48-year-old convicted sex offender, pretended to be a 17-year-old boy online in an effort to coerce and entice a 15-year-old girl to engage in sexual activity. Hasselbrink allegedly knew that his victim was a minor, so he lied about his own age and took other measures to hide his unlawful intent. This office will continue to relentlessly pursue predators who sexually exploit children, whether online or in person, according to allegations contained in the complaint. From at least in or about April 2023 up to on or about July 2, 2023. Hasselbrink, a 48-year-old male who was a convicted sex offender, engaged in sexually explicit message conversations with a 15-year-old girl, victim 1, and traveled to meet victim 1 near her home in Dutchess County, New York, to engage in sexual activity. Hasselbrink, 48, of Quincy, Illinois, is charged with one count of enticing a minor to engage in unlawful sexual activity, which carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years in prison and a maximum sentence of life in prison, and one count of engaging in this offense, while being required to register as a sex offender, which carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years in prison, which must run consecutively to any other sentence imposed. The minimum and maximum potential sentences in this case are prescribed by Congress and are provided here for informational purposes only, as any sentencing of the defendant will be determined by a judge. This case is being handled by the office's White Plains Division. Assistant U.S. Attorneys Marcia Cohen and Kingdar Prusin are in charge of the prosecution. The allegations in the complaint are merely accusations, and the defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. June 17, 2024. Lamar Whitehead, Brooklyn church leader, sentenced to 9 years in prison for fraud, extortion, and false statements. Damian Williams, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, announced that Lamar Whitehead was sentenced today by U.S. District Judge Lorna G. Schofield to 9 years in prison for wire fraud, attempted wire fraud, attempted extortion, and making false statements to federal law enforcement agents. Whitehead was previously convicted on all charges following a 2-week trial. According to the allegations in the indictment and the evidence at trial, Whitehead, who leads a church in Brooklyn, New York, stole from his own parishioners, sought to defraud and extort a businessman, and committed loan fraud. First, Whitehead induced one of his parishioners to invest approximately $90,000 of her retirement savings with him by promising to use the money to help her buy a home. He then spent the money on luxury goods and other personal expenses and, when she demanded to be paid back, he continued to lie to avoid returning the money. Second, Whitehead extorted a businessman for $5,000. Then attempted to convince the same businessman to lend him $500,000 and give him a stake in certain real estate transactions in return for favorable actions from the mayor of New York City, even though Whitehead knew he could not obtain the favors he promised. Third, Whitehead submitted a fraudulent application for a $250,000 business loan, including doctored bank statements that falsely claimed Whitehead had millions of dollars in the bank and hundreds of thousands of dollars in monthly revenue. He submitted similar fraudulent applications to various other financial institutions, stealing millions of dollars in the process. Finally, when speaking with FBI agents who were executing a search warrant outside Whitehead's mansion in New Jersey, Whitehead falsely claimed that he had no cell phones other than the phone he was carrying when, in fact, Whitehead had and regularly used a second cell phone, which was inside his house at the time. In addition to the prison term, Whitehead, 45, of Paramus, New Jersey, was sentenced to 3 years of supervised release and ordered to pay $85,000 in restitution and forfeit $95,000. Mr. Williams praised the outstanding investigative work of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This case is being handled by the office's Public Corruption Unit. Assistant U.S. Attorneys Jessica Greenwood, Jane Kim, and Derek Wickstrom are in charge of the prosecution. Equality before the law, also known as equality under the law. Equality in the eyes of the law, legal equality, or legal egalitarianism, is the principle that all people must be equally protected by the law. The rule of law is a political ideal that all citizens and institutions within a country, state, or community are accountable to the same laws, including lawmakers and leaders. It is sometimes stated simply as no one is above the law.